I'm looking at a historical chart of life expectancy starting from 1850, so just before the Civil War. Now, one thing that catches my eye is that back in 1850, or actually all the way back in 1776, you needed to be 35 years old to run for the President of the United States. And yet, 35 used to be life expectancy. What that tells me is that we used to think that people had to have the wisdom to know how to live a long life expectancy in order to run for president, right? We've kind of gotten rid of that requirement by not raising the age, right? And that's why the quality of the presidents we've had has degraded a lot since 1776, right? I think that's a big reason, right? Imagine if you had to be 80 to run for president today, right? You would only get people who are still healthy at 80, which tells me that you're filtering out a lot of people who don't take care of themselves. That's my opinion. Now, the other thing that catches my eye is that as bad as the Great Depression was, it was not a significant killer. In fact, it really enhanced our life expectancy. The Great Depression is right here. And I think that makes sense to me because GDP definitely took a sharp dive during the Great Depression. But what is GDP? If you go to a restaurant and you eat yourself to death with junk food, with trans fat, and then you go to the hospital to get surgery because of all the trans fat you ate, and then you got to go to the morgue, and then you hold a big funeral, that's all part of GDP. It doesn't tell you that people were actually healthy and happy, right? It just tells you that money changed hands. And I think that's a big problem with how we measure our society. Society doesn't get better just because money changed hands from one person to another, right? Now, the other thing that catches my eye is that if you look at this point right here, 1960 or so, that's around the time that we started to have major developments in junk foods that we take for granted today, right? High fructose corn syrup, monosodium glutamate, and trans fatty acids, right? They might not have been invented at that time, but that's when we started to mass produce them, and people really took it for granted. That's also around the time when most people started to watch advertisements for that stuff on their televisions, right? And that's when the trend line for life expectancy really took a sharp change, right? Now imagine if we had continued along this trend line. Today we'd be living to be 90, 95 years old, right? Which kind of makes sense, right? If you look around yourself at people who avoid partaking in all the crap that we've been producing since the 1960s, I would say having a life expectancy of 95 is not all that unimaginable, right? For people who live their life like it's that day, right? I gotta say that I don't live like it's that day either because I spend a lot of time in front of the screen, but I try to. Now, here's the Spanish flu pandemic, right? Notice how life expectancy in 2020 hasn't dropped by 15 or 20 years, right? It really goes to show how much we've really played up the crisis for political benefits, right? Anyways, what I find really exciting is that if we keep increasing, see, this is not really a straight line, right? It's increasing in speed as well, right? If you can make it to a day when life expectancy is increasing by more than a year per year, then in theory, your life expectancy is unlimited, right? Because let's say today you're 35 years old and life expectancy is 79, let's say. And then next year you're 36 years old, but life expectancy is 81 now. And you'll never catch up to that life expectancy number, right? That's what really gets me excited about taking good care of my body. And why do I want to live forever? The reason I want to live forever is that if I make a mistake during my life, right? Let's say I marry the wrong person and 10 years later I get divorced, right? Well, if I live forever, that's only a drop in the bucket, right? Now, why do I want to be able to make mistakes? Because the more mistakes that I can make, the more risk I can take, right? Imagine that I can marry the wrong person and just swallow that with a burp, right? That means I could date a whole lot more aggressively, right? I know I'm talking an extreme example, but you get the idea, right? The more tolerance for risk you have, the more risk you can take and the more reward you can reap out of it, right? That's the flavor I want to say. All right, thanks for watching.